Hi, this is a video from the new Civil War reenactor. Today's video is all about food prep, how to get ready for your event, and what I've learned in my first year doing Civil War reenacting. I'll start with the most authentic kind of campaign items that I find useful, and then move to more, call it camp comforts, if you want to call it that. So let's get started. So the first item that everybody knows about is hardtack, right? I just made a batch of this last weekend. Came out pretty good. It's always a work in progress. There's a lot of videos on this, so I'm not going to go into detail about how to prep exactly, but the basic parts that I will tell you I've learned is a good mix for me has just been, and again, you're just mixing flour, salt, and water, but typically 2 cups of flour to a little over a half a cup of water, and then a couple pinches of salt, and just doing that over and over again. What's really handy is using a device like this, which you can order from a sutler. It creates the holes. And again, as you guys probably know, the holes were here so it wouldn't crack when you cook it. My first mistake making hardtack is I put butter on the pan. Butter is obviously organic, which means your hardtack will not last years, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. It's also not authentic if you make butter. So, you know, the other trick is you'll notice it's kind of floury on bottom, is you want to use you want to put a layer of flour on the pan itself so that when you try to peel this up, it doesn't stick. I found that cooking it for about 4 hours is most effective. Try to not use bleached flour as well. You can find organic flour in the store. I mean, flour in general is super cheap. So, you know, you're looking at a difference of like 50 cents for a whole package of it, maybe $1. But that would be most authentic. So that's item number 1. I mean, you're going to find that in a weekend, you're not going to eat many of these, maybe a couple of them. So making a batch like this is probably going to last me maybe even the whole season unless other people start eating it. Second item I want to talk about is raw peanuts. Raw peanuts, and again, I have a Southern impression, is very, very realistic. These are organic. There's a number of Amish farms on the East Coast that produce these, which is different than the kind of peanuts that you would normally get like at the ballpark. So it's important you get them raw. They look the same and everything else. To cook them and prep them in a real Civil War fashion, simply drop them in a boiling pot or, you know, just even your tin cup, boil them up, put salt in there. I tend to go a little heavy on the salt. Every time I've gotten this out, everybody around the campus seemed to enjoy them. You cook them with the shell on. So that wasn't clear to me, but after I did research, that's the way it seems to be done. I do unpeel them and eat the peanut inside, not the shell, but that's how they're prepped. The next item is green coffee. Pretty tough to find green coffee made in Virginia these days or somewhere realistic. It looks like this, so it really does look green. I only found some from Nicaragua. Not ideal because, I don't know, the bean is really, really hard. On this one, in fact, it almost ruined my coffee grinder. I tried to do what would be authentic in the field, which is smash it up with your bayonet, but it's so hard, the beans, that they wouldn't even crack, nor in the blender. I probably won't do that a lot. And to be honest, for the South, green coffee beans probably wasn't even super realistic. Only probably the North had access to that type of stuff, at least beyond the beginning of the war. I haven't done this yet. It'd probably be ideal if I get an actual chicory root, but this is obviously an example of what the South did do to make a coffee-like drink. It's called coffee, which to me is kind of comical, so there's really no caffeine in there. But nonetheless, it is what they did, something warm to kind of prep, warm me up in the morning. I'll put these types of items in bags like these. You can buy them from the sutlers, or you can make them really, really cheap and easy. Similarly, I'll put the salt in these as well. I put this as a reminder. This is actually not what you'd want to bring. You wouldn't want to bring an orange, but you know, for the South would probably want to bring some green apples, maybe some peppers, things like that. So I think the first event, pretty far with me, I brought like berries, and I guess berries could be realistic, but I have bananas and things like that. It's probably not realistic. It would have been things that you could find in the farms as you're traveling through, most likely, which would have been like apples and, you know, peanuts and corn, of course. And that brings us to the cornmeal. So as you know, in the South, there's corn dodgers, which is effectively cooking cornmeal in a frying pan with bacon grease. There's cornmeal mush, which is basically just this mixed with some hot water and salt. And I've done that as well. The challenge, well, a couple things. One is with cornmeal, you need to, first of all, find the germ in cornmeal, because back in those days, it was a certain germination, or I'm not an expert on this, but the cornmeal basically had different properties than the cornmeal does today. The cornmeal today is very fine. It's just not what they would have had back then. Anson Mills does make this. You can order this. I copied this from another video. Thank you to whoever produced that video. But they shipped this off to me pretty nicely. And there's all different kinds of cornmeal. So I'd experiment with that. The challenge with cornmeal, well, number one is the corn dodgers are pretty good, but I found the cornmeal mush not very tasty. And on top of it, since I wanted to be authentic, I stored them in these bags. And at least here in Northern California, during the day, millions of ants got in there. I didn't, I was trying to be campaign authentic, so I actually poured them in my cup and just boiled them up and ate the ants with the cornmeal, but it's kind of gross. So I probably will not carry this on a lot of campaign events, as opposed to like the peanuts and the hardtack, where, the insects seem to not get into those as much. And also they're more tasty, to be totally candid. I'll probably do a lot of green apples too, because those are pretty tasty when you get going. I just don't have any apples on hand, but I think you guys know what an apple is. I do bring this. This is, if you go like on Amazon, you can find cured bacon, like salt cured bacon. There's a couple sites that do it. The reason I do that is I find it pretty far, but when people pull out coolers and ice and things like that. So, would it be better to have salt pork? Absolutely. And that's something I still need to learn how to prep and handle. But this at least gets me closer to that, because this does not have to be refrigerated. You can just, for the whole weekend, have it out. It's not going to spoil or go bad because it's cured. If you guys have ever been to like Europe, that's what they do with their meats. They usually have it like hanging from the ceiling in a bar. That's why it doesn't go bad. So it's the same process. It's kind of expensive. I want to say 50 or 60 bucks for like 3 packages of these, but they're pretty tasty, and I highly recommend it. Here's some of my farb items that I just want to talk about. So brought a lot of farb stuff. The easiest and best, I think, is getting cans of food that, can give you a quick hearty meal. I found these Dinty Moore ones online. They're super cheap for a ton of cans of them, and they're pretty tasty. Thank you to my buddy Mac in the 7th Virginia that helped give me a suggestion for, I think it was Sullivan's Press, that creates can covers. I have some of those on order right now to come out to me, and they actually have a can top too that looks more authentic to the Civil War period. So I'm going to cover a couple of these with the labels and the tops and bottoms to make them real. Something I learned at my last event too is that it's good to have actual can openers, because some of these things ripped off and I was kind of stuck. These are really cheap. I found these online and people swear by using them. Obviously not campaign authentic, nor is this, but there's a couple items just in case you do get starving and need some real kind of sustenance. Coffee too. I do have a little bit of an addiction to coffee, so if I'm going to cheat a little bit, I'll probably use a couple of these packets, but I'll at least try to hide it at a bare minimum in one of these prior to the event. In fact, I'll probably dump a bunch of these packets into this so it just looks like coffee, right? And then here's a couple other things. Copied this from my captain, but I know he carried these. It's a good idea. Anything with salt, going to replace a lot of the salt loss that you have in the hot sun. So, pretzels or some other suggestion. These are good too, because they're kind of not breakable like Doritos or something. So if you had to have a farb item, I kind of think these are better. Similar, or I should say unsimilarly, I got some like granola bars and stuff in case I didn't want to prep breakfast in the morning. These are actually bad because they like smash in my bag. So I think like a hard granola bar would be better. So, I mean, worst case scenario, you get starving, you can't do the campaigning that you thought you could. You can kind of rely on these foods to get you by for the weekend, plus your fruit, right? And I tended to overpack when I first started. Honestly, I might need 1 can, maybe 2 cans for the whole weekend, and maybe 1 bag. Like I used to bring like 4 bags of corn nuts and 3 bags of pretzels. You're not going to need all that stuff. You just need like a little tiny bit like this in case you get starving for real food. Otherwise, I honestly probably will not bring the cornmeal at a lot of events because it's not great tasting unless I'm doing corn dodgers. I will bring the bacon because it's pretty close to salt pork. And then I'll obviously bring this stuff, which is what I'm going to try to eat most of the time is you know, to make it as authentic as possible. But, you know, hopefully this helps you prep on some of the things you might want or not want at a given event. And yeah, hope this is useful for you. I'll continue to learn a lot this year as well. And everybody have a great day out there. Take care.